from last night. Going to start off with the pay-per-view, Fox pay-per-view, as you had Andy the Destroyer Ruiz taking on Chris the Nightmare Arreola. We had Chris Arreola on the program last week, as many of you heard. And very intriguing fight coming into this, because it not only was a fight against, two guys the week before Cinco de Mayo, both of Mexican heritage, but you had two guys coming in who are not known as looking the most in shape as it comes to in the heavyweight division, but both guys who probably got into some of the best shape of their career for this bout against each other. And were both very motivated. Both felt like there's a lot on the line coming into this. And there really was. I mean, especially, probably more so for Andy Ruiz because of the way he looked in his last fight against Anthony Joshua, and especially physically. Not so much of his performance, because he didn't get knocked out. And I really don't think that he should be embarrassed by that performance, but it's one of those where I know he probably felt like he left a lot on the table of a guy with his style that, he probably, you saw what he did on short notice, probably could do if he really took it seriously, probably could have beaten Anthony Joshua again. So you have that on that side. And then on Chris Arreola's side, as you heard with us, probably his last stand as far as like if he's really going to get back into the heavyweight title and the heavyweight title picture, which is kind of its own mess right now to begin with. You got to beat Andy Ruiz, and you probably got to do it in some serious fashion to get the kind of credit you deserve. So he and look, he had a moment in this fight where he was pretty much on his way to getting there. With Andy coming in 30 pounds lighter than he did in the fight, the rematch with Anthony Joshua. And Chris Arreola coming in, I believe it was the lightest of his career. He was in the 220s, so he looked really, really good too. Very poised, very calm and calculated those first 3 rounds of this fight, basically letting Andy come to him, and he hit him with a couple of big shots. But I think you saw immediately right out of the gate what kind of shape Andy Ruiz was in, just because, he basically touched the canvas, popped right back up, kind of weathered the storm throughout the rest of the round, but it definitely was a Chris Arreola round, so you got 10-8 on that scorecard. So Andy's already working his way back, even though I did think that he took the first round. And then in the second round, a lot more of the same. Andy was very aggressive, and he kept getting caught flush coming in. But again, there has to be some level of credit you got to give to him and Eddie Reynoso for the kind of shape that he was in this fight, because he never went down. He never went down after that first initial flash. Like, he got hit, stumbled, looked like he was about to hit to go down, but he was able to keep his wits, keep his mindset and everything about that, and was able to withstand the storm and really from that point really flip the fight on its head, because I didn't have Chris winning another round after that third round, where it looked like, all right, maybe Chris Arreola is going to pull up the upset here. And he's up, 29-27 after 2 rounds. He's got a 10-8 in the bag. Maybe this is the spot. But Andy really bared down after that, started, boxing his way. Maybe was a little bit more cautious, really started letting Chris come to him. And Chris, who really kind of flipped his style on his head with this one, because you think about all the punches that he threw against Konecki, and then to this one, it was a much more slowed down pace. And the gap just kind of started getting wider and wider and wider. The other big swing in this fight really happened in round 8. And Andy was starting to really build some momentum. And then he hit him with a hook right onto his shoulder. And Arreola looked like he was in some serious pain. And from that point on, didn't really look like he had a lot of return fire for Andy Ruiz. The combinations really started piling up. Andy was hitting with some vicious shots, especially he hit him with a huge 1-2-3 in the 11th round. At that point, I got him up 117, 107, 101 after that round. So I ended up having him close it out 117, 110. So it ends up looking like a real blowout, but it really was an interesting fight, probably up, I say, until like round 8. There was a lot of intrigue, because though they weren't the most vicious knockdowns in the world, or vicious knockdown in the world, and the most vicious shots from like Andy, didn't look like, he really collected his wits about him quickly. Hell, you still have the heavy favorite on the ropes and stumbling and bumbling all over the place. And a lot of people were probably shocked seeing that. From with and to that, you got to give a lot of credit to Chris and Joe Goosen for the preparation, the conditioning, the game plan. They took advantage of an aggressive fighter. But on its head, you also have to look at the new way. And I don't know what that was with Andy, because Andy's typically, more quick-speeded, will let you kind of buy into his mistakes. He'll take advantage of your mistakes, use his quick hands. He was training with Canelo Alvarez. We know Canelo Alvarez is like the ultimate hunter. He's super aggressive. He goes for the kill. Andy looked very similar to how Eddie Reynoso has been training his fighters. We saw this with Ryan Garcia in his last fight where he got put on the canvas early. That's the style they go with. They want to be the bully. And with Andy, he was able to kind of divert back to what really is his bread and butter when he's successful. So overall, I would say, look, if you're Andy Ruiz, one of the things you probably want to come away with, because it is a Chris Arreola who is 40 years old, and you're trying to get back into the title picture. Does this fight do it? I would say probably not, from the standpoint of, was it the most impressive performance in the world? No. Were there some great things that he could take out of it? Yeah. I mean, he obviously looks in some of the best shape of his career. He was in good enough shape to withstand an early storm, and he was able to adjust. I mean, he adjusted to stuff that wasn't working early on in that fight and went back and went to plan B, and plan B basically had it a shutout from the time that he went with that from basically round 4 on, excuse me. It was a shutout, so at least in my eyes it was. Who they got? Larry Hazard, that's who's doing the judging for Fox. I gotta tell you, Fox, you guys know I don't like, Brian Kenny calling blow by blow. I think he's terrible at it. But honestly, Brian Kenny was the best part of a bad broadcast night. That Fox broadcast is rough. It's rough. And Lennox Lewis is rough. Sean Porter's rough. And I know Sean Porter's very green, so I give him kind of a pass on that. Lennox Lewis, he contradicts himself. There was one point where he said, like, in the third round, he was like, no, it was after the knockdown, where he goes, oh, Chris Arreola should have pounced on him. And then literally 2 seconds later, he's like, nah, you know what? Chris Arreola is doing he didn't say no. He's just like, actually, he's like, Chris Arreola, he's doing the smart thing here, biding his time, not going to walk into anything crazy. I'm like, well, you just said the opposite thing 20 seconds ago, Lennox. So, yeah, but Larry Hazard, I don't know what first of all, he gave, I think, round 3. I'm pretty sure he gave to Chris, he gave to Andy Ruiz, which it was such an, oh yeah, there were 2 crazy ones. He gave round 3 to Andy Ruiz, which was just crazy because Chris Arreola nearly knocked him down twice in that fight. So in that round. And then it was either 7 or 8. I forget. It was super lopsided. It was obvious. Actually, I think it was the round Arreola got hurt with his arm. And Larry Hazard's like, yeah, I got the last 2 rounds for Chris Arreola. And even Brian Kenny was like, bro, what are you talking about? So that's why I give Brian Kenny some props for tonight, even though I'm not typically a fan of him calling boxing matches. I think he probably, I think one of the reasons he was probably good tonight is because he had to kind of keep things on the train tracks a little bit more, so he wasn't bringing up wild debates. Because typically, like, when Brian Kenny calls a fight, he's like, he turns it into First Take, and he's like hosting the great debates of boxing. I'm like, bro, just call the fight. And he did a lot more of that tonight. But Sean Porter, not great, but he's new. And Lennox Lewis, like, he's always all over the place. And Larry Hazard, might as well have had Larry Merchant doing the judging. But anyway, as far as the consequences of this fight with Andy, because look, Chris loses a lopsided fight, he still got name value. He put him on the canvas, so I don't think that Chris Arreola is at a point where he has to retire or anything like that. He can definitely go and keep fighting. But you look at this for Andy, like, how can Andy get into the mix of getting back to title contention? Because look, he is the former unified heavyweight champion of the world. That carries a lot of weight, no matter what. I mean, headline to pay-per-view. Say whether it was worth the money or not. We can make jokes or whatever or not all day. By the way, I thought it was a pretty good card, and an entertaining card that Fox had put together. But we have to, I gotta know with Andy, like where are they gonna go with him next? And I honestly think that all of these top guys, he makes for fun fights. I think if they could get, I don't know what Deontay Wilder's up to or what they're gonna do for his next fight, but there's no good reason why it shouldn't be against a guy like Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz, first of all, it's a good opportunity for Deontay. I mean, like, one of my big criticisms of Anthony Joshua was that second fight against Andy Ruiz, because Andy Ruiz came into that fight not giving a rat's ass, came 30 pounds heavier than he was tonight, was maybe a couple jogs away from 3 bills, and you couldn't put him away. A guy who humiliated you and put you to the canvas multiple times. They mentioned it many times tonight. Basically, stuck and move the entire fight, and you're the heavyweight champion of the world, and you were the former heavyweight champion of the world, and the guy who blasted you, you kind of ran out the clock on him. I think if you're Deontay Wilder, it would carry a lot of weight if he got in there with an Andy Ruiz and just absolutely floored him, especially with that old Anthony Joshua rivalry. We've seen with Andy, he is susceptible to getting put on the canvas, and because of that, you have to take into account a guy like Deontay Wilder could really, really hurt him and really put him out. But also, if he's able to keep that pace up and he's able to get within that reach, he's by far the better tactical boxer, which we've seen against a guy like Tyson Fury or many fighters that like Luis Ortiz. We've seen this with Deontay at all times. Like, he can get outboxed many fights. So I think it's an intriguing fight, quite frankly. They also have this whole, like, if this whole thing doesn't go down with AJ and Tyson Fury, and there's a lot of varying reports on where things are, because you had Bob Arum say this week that the fight is dead in the water, at least for the summer. Eddie Hearn saying the fight is done. Tyson Fury has been very clear that he wants to be active. So if the fight's not going to happen this summer, can there be a fight in the summer with anybody of note? If you're a guy like Tyson Fury and you're looking for a marketable fight, taking on Andy Ruiz is definitely that, for sure. I don't know what his contract situation is. I know that he's an Al Heyman guy, but so there may be some friction there as far as making the fight. But they did it with Deontay Wilder. I just think that and it would, you'd predict that it would be on pay-per-view. So I think Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder are good, fun matchups that I'd like to see with the guy who held all the belts and has, a huge signature knockout victory over Anthony Joshua. And also, I think if you're Tyson Fury, it's a cool thing to kind of have going into it, because if Tyson Fury goes and obliterates Andy Ruiz, he's got that going into the AJ fight anyway. And then, honestly, there's always the AJ trilogy. Now, the thing is, I don't think AJ will take it. I think the other two guys, they'd probably gladly go in there with Andy Ruiz. I don't think that AJ would. I think that he's gonna, unless he gets into a situation where he's absolutely handcuffed by the mandatories or something like that, I just don't think he's gonna do it. But anyway, from my standpoint, Andy Ruiz, I hope that maybe we get against a Luis Ortiz, maybe we get him against a Joe Parker again. They had a very close fight the last time. Joe Parker got the nod today, although I thought Derek Chisora should have gotten his arm raised, quite frankly. And then maybe Dillian White. I don't know. I just think that this guy is still, there's a couple things that go for him. One, he's the former unified heavyweight champion of the world, so he's always going to have that. Two, I think he's super marketable. Like, look, you just saw in a crowd today, people in California, they have the headbands on, they love him. So he definitely, I think, can sell, especially in Southern California. If you did a fight down in Mexico or you did a fight by Texas, I think that Andy Ruiz sells. I think that he's a marketable guy. I think that when he won heavyweight championship of the world, you saw all the endorsements and like the fat guy who can knock people out and the fat guy that can be an effective boxer. There's something there, and there's something about him too. I think his persona that's a little bit more, a little less bombastic than Tyson Fury is. So I think people connect with him a little bit more. So I don't know. I don't know if this performance necessarily warrants, Andy deserves to get X, Y, and Z next. But I do think that there were some good things that we could say, hey, under Eddie Reynoso, this guy took on a hardened veteran who doesn't get, floored. He gets stopped, as they mentioned tonight, but he's not a guy who gets just absolutely, obliterated when he goes out there. And quite frankly, he fought a better version of Chris Arreola than Deontay Wilder did. Like, he fought a very motivated, in shape, tuned up Chris Arreola, who caught him. And Andy can get caught, and that's kind of what makes him entertaining too, is that he doesn't let the fist stop flying, and he's very, very tough. So, all in all, probably give the performance I would probably give the performance from Andy a B, because he did get knocked down, and it did look a little dangerous there. But also, being in the shape that he was in, you have to give him credit for that. The adjustments, give him credit for that. And, hurting Chris Arreola's arm, I mean, that is still a thing. Like, people are all slobbing over Canelo when he does it, and he basically did the same thing. Knocked out his shoulder, and that really, really sunk the fight for Andy Ruiz. So a little signature there from Eddie Reynoso of taking out the arms.